Welcome to Hollywood Secrets Information. And in this video, we're going to travel back to one of the boldest, wildest decades in movie history. The 1980s, that this was a time when comedy pushed boundaries without hesitation. Nothing was off limits. Social rules were looser. Political correctness wasn't part of everyday vocabulary, and filmmakers took risks that would spark outrage if released today. From outrageous teen humor to adult workplace chaos, these comedies defined a generation. But would they survive in today's social climate? Let's explore 12 raunchy 80s comedies that would never be made the same way today, and why. 1. Revenge of the Nerds, 1984. The 1980s loved underdog stories, and Revenge of the Nerds turned social outsiders into unlikely heroes. The film played on college stereotypes, fraternity culture, and exaggerated pranks for comedic effect. At the time, its edgy humor was seen as rebellious and empowering for misfits. But certain plot elements, especially around identity deception and consent, are heavily criticized today. What once was framed as comedic triumph would now spark debate across social media. Interestingly, the movie was filmed at the University of Arizona during summer break, and producers reportedly faced pushback even then over some of its content. While its underdog message remains beloved, its execution reflects a very different cultural moment. 2. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, 1982. Written by Cameron Crowe, Fast Times at Ridgemont High offered a more realistic, yet still risque, look at teen life. It addressed dating, peer pressure, and growing up in suburban America. While progressive in some ways, it also featured scenes that were considered daring for mainstream cinema. In today's climate, certain scenes involving teenage characters would likely be handled with much greater sensitivity. The film is famous for launching the careers of actors like Sean Penn. It remains culturally significant, but its frank approach to teenage sexuality reflects the unfiltered style of its era. 3. Private Resort, 1985. Private Resort starred young actors Johnny Depp and Rob Morrow in a sun-soaked comedy filled with misunderstandings and exaggerated romantic pursuits. The 1980s often portrayed romance through slapstick scenarios and bold humor. However, modern audiences might critique its portrayal of relationships and gender dynamics. What was once considered lighthearted escapism now raises conversations about respectful representation. Interestingly, Johnny Depp later distanced himself from the film as his career evolved into more serious roles. For Porky's, 1981, in the early 1980s, teen sex comedies became a box office goldmine. Porky's captured the era's rebellious spirit, following a group of high school boys chasing romance and mischief in 1950s Florida. Its humor leaned heavily on locker room jokes and exaggerated stereotypes, reflecting a time when such portrayals were treated as harmless fun. The film became one of the highest-grossing Canadian productions ever, proving there was a massive audience for boundary-pushing teen humor. However, many of its jokes centered on voyeurism and gender stereotypes, elements that would face serious scrutiny today. Modern audiences are far more aware of consent and representation issues, making a direct remake unlikely without major changes. Behind the scenes, the film was made on a modest budget but became a cultural phenomenon, helping launch the teen comedy boom of the decade. 5. Police Academy, 1984. Police Academy became a massive franchise thanks to its over-the-top humor and broad character stereotypes. The film thrived during a time when exaggerated impersonations and caricatures were standard comedic tools. Today, some of its jokes involving race, gender, and authority figures would likely be reconsidered. Social expectations around inclusivity and respectful representation have changed dramatically. Despite criticism, the film was a financial success, spawning multiple sequels and becoming a defining comedy of the decade. 6. Stripes, 1981. Starring Bill Murray, Stripes blended military satire with raunchy humor. Released during the Cold War era, it tapped into anti-establishment attitudes and youthful rebellion. The film's jokes about authority and gender roles were typical of the time, but would likely face scrutiny today. Military comedies now tend to balance humor with cultural awareness. Behind the scenes, Bill Murray reportedly improvised many of his lines, contributing to the film's spontaneous comedic style. 7. Weird Science, 1985. Directed by John Hughes, Weird Science combined teen fantasy with outrageous comedy. Two awkward teens create their ideal woman through a computer experiment. In the 1980s, this concept was seen as playful sci-fi humor. Today, themes around objectification and fantasy creation of women would likely be approached with more nuance. The film's blend of technology and teen wish fulfillment captured early computer-era curiosity, making it a time capsule of both cultural and technological trends. 8. The Last American Virgin, 1982. This remake of an Israeli film surprised audiences with its emotional ending. While marketed as a typical teen sex comedy, it offered a sobering twist about unrequited love. The film's frank discussions about teenage relationships were bold from mainstream cinema. Today, similar themes might be framed with more sensitivity and inclusivity. Its unexpected dramatic tone helped it gain cult status over the years. 9. Soul Man, 1986. Soul Man remains one of the most controversial comedies of the decade. The story followed a student who changes his appearance to qualify for a scholarship. Even at the time, the premise sparked protests. Today, it would almost certainly not be produced in the same form due to conversations about race, identity, and cultural representation. The film serves as a reminder of how Hollywood's understanding of social issues has evolved over time. 10. Spring Break, 1983. Spring Break capitalized on the rising popularity of vacation party culture. The film leaned heavily into exaggerated college antics and beachside chaos in the 1980s. Such portrayals symbolized youthful freedom. Today, filmmakers would likely focus more on character depth and responsible storytelling rather than pure shock humor. The movie became a cult favorite, representing the carefree, cinematic style of its era. 11. Hard Bodies, 1984. Hard Bodies epitomized the beach party comedy subgenre. Built around exaggerated adult humor and competition-based plots, it reflected the decades of fascination with body culture and flamboyant excess. Modern studios would likely rework its themes to align with today's standards around consent and representation. The 1980s prioritized spectacle and shock. Today's audiences demand awareness and balance. Despite criticism, the film remains a vivid example of how comedy once pushed boundaries without hesitation. 12. Bachelor Party, 1984. Starring a young Tom Hanks, Bachelor Party showed a side of the actor far removed from his later wholesome image. The film followed a chaotic pre-wedding celebration filled with outrageous gags and exaggerated adult humor. In the 1980s, the wild night before marriage trope was a comedy staple. But many of the jokes relied on shock value and caricatures that would likely be toned down today. Cultural conversations around relationships and gender roles have evolved significantly since then. Behind the scenes, Tom Hanks initially hesitated to take the role, unsure about its tone. Ironically, The film helped solidify his early comedic career before he transitioned into more dramatic roles. The 1980s were fearless, experimental, and often outrageous. These films reflected a different cultural landscape, one where comedy tested limits and controversy sometimes fueled ticket sales. But as society evolves, so does entertainment. What once made audiences laugh now sparks conversation, debate, and reflection. And that evolution tells us just as much about today as it does about the past. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood history, make sure to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments. Which of these films shocked you the most? And don't forget to subscribe to Hollywood Secrets Information for more untold stories from the world of cinema. Until next time, stay curious.